Welcome to episode 46 of the Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why the reasons we are often drawn to fearless leaders and what you can take away from this and apply to your own life. So stay tuned for another rockstar episode. Hello, visionaries. Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast, where you can create the life you desire by tapping into your inner wisdom. I'm your host, Padma Ali. I'm widely known in the field of psychology to create long-lasting transformation. And now I'm here to help you create the life you desire using a combination of neuropsychology and ancient healing practices. This podcast is for you, evolved, overachieving leader who's ready to unlock your highest potential. I'm here to guide you through a process of self-discovery to be the creator of your destiny. And you can do all of that by just taking aligned actions, tapping into the power of your brain, your inner wisdom, and ancient practices. So stay tuned, folks. I am so delighted you are here. Hello, visionaries. Welcome to another episode of the Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the reason why fearless leaders blow your mind. Have you noticed how we're often drawn to certain people? There's like a charisma to them. You may not even know them or why you follow them, but you just find yourself wanting to be around them. You want to take in all the information. Even if you don't know this person personally, you want to take in everything that they put out there. And do you know why you do that? It's all energy. Everything is energy. We read energy more than we read words. Yes, you too, Miss or Mr. Brainy, Miss or Mr. Logical person, analytical left brain person. Yes, you too. You too read energy more than you read words. Dr. Bruce Lipton, author of Biology of Belief, talks about how everything is energy and how we communicate through energy. And if you haven't read his book, it's really amazing. It's worth a read. And you can even look up the specific topic on communication through energy on YouTube. Just search for We Communicate Through Energy, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Lipton. And it's really fascinating what you hear him talk about. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you're following me, none of the information there would be like, what are you talking about? I'm sure it'll resonate for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be following me. That's also because of energy. There's something energetically I'm putting out there that feels resonant for you and you're following me. That's the bottom line. And I wanted to share some of the things that I've noticed about fearless leaders. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because as humans, as a collective, we're learning from each other. And that's how we evolve and grow. I'm constantly evolving, constantly learning, constantly watching people and learning from them and seeing what I can use to evolve my own life and in the process evolve other people's lives. And so by sharing this and sharing some of the reasons why we're attracted to fearless leaders and what are their specific traits or qualities and what do they do or don't do, it can help you evolve and it can also help you learn and take away some of these things that you may or may not even have considered. And I've compiled this. It's obviously not everything, and this is mostly brain-centered because I'm an expert in the brain. So it's mostly brain-centered, and it's mostly specifically about how the minds of fearless leaders operate and what do they do to keep their mind in a high vibration state. And so that's what I've compiled in this podcast episode. And this is from watching many of my very successful fearless clients, which I'm so honored and humbled to have worked with and continue to work with, and also from my mentors. And also my own experiences in this process of living in this life, in this human body. So that's what inspired me to make this podcast episode. And before we go into this, I also want to thank each and every one of you who have taken the time to leave a review. I really, really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And it's not just for me, like we've often talked about. As a visionary, you too have a vision of reaching as many people and lifting the vibration of this planet. And you're helping to do that by sharing these episodes and also leaving a review. So thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, my friends, shall we talk about the characteristics of fearless leaders? I've actually compiled them into 6 characteristics, and they're not in any particular order. They just came to me and I just put them down. And so they're not in any particular order, but I wanted to share them. The number one characteristic that I have seen, well, it's not the number one characteristic. This is the number one in my list. So number one is fearless leaders are willing to be vulnerable. As you may have already realized that we as humans are so programmed to protect ourselves. It's almost contrary to our inner nature to be vulnerable. However, vulnerability is what allows us to connect. Think about your most intimate relationship. And the reason you connect with your partner in the way you do is because you allowed yourself to be vulnerable, isn't it? Now, how can you apply that to business, or how can you apply that to the work you do in the world? And how do you work with the contrariness, if there's any such word, of not wanting to protect yourself? Because when you, as a leader, you may already be experiencing this. You're in the limelight a lot. So how do you balance being vulnerable, showing vulnerability, while also being fierce and being a leader, being a person where other people can follow? If you see this as, okay, I'm scared of being vulnerable because it is just survival. It's just how my brain has been programmed to be. It will just stop the fear, won't it? See, we don't have to deal with saber-toothed tigers and lions and dinosaurs. I mean, not that we were, that was, erase that. There was no dinosaurs when we existed. But you know what I'm talking about. We didn't have to face the dangers we did when we were evolving. But we do deal with another type of saber-toothed tigers right now. And that is judgment. There's so much fear of judgment. If you look deep down, anything that you feel worried about doing or not doing often comes down to, am I going to be judged? Am I going to be accepted? Am I going to feel a part of this community or not? Or am I going to be ostracized if I share these things, if I do these things? These feel far more threatening than dealing with a saber-toothed tiger for a lot of people. This often means that you're just wanting to protect your heart. You want to protect yourself without knowing you want to protect yourself. And unconsciously or consciously, when you're scared of judgment, when you're scared of how is this going to make me look, we build a wall around ourselves, don't we? And that is one of the traits I've seen with fearless leaders, is that they're willing to be vulnerable. they don't worry about how is this going to land? How is this going to make me judged? Because as human beings, not as human beings, we're always judging. You're judging me right now. You are. I mean, like, that's just positive or negative. You're judging, right? We do. You might be like, wow, these episodes are so amazing. I'll get so much from it. Or somebody might be like, oh my God, like, what is she talking about? Like, I can't listen to her voice. Either ways, it doesn't matter. We judge. As humans, we judge. And this is an invitation to see, does it really matter? And this is where I'm going to ask you a question. If you have not put yourself out there, or you're holding yourself back, or haven't been vulnerable because of how it lands or how it doesn't land, or whether you'll be accepted, or whether it's being responded to, or whether someone likes you or doesn't like you, or you, whatever that is, what's more important to you? What's more important to you? Being the person that you are, and just allowing people to come to you because of the person that you are, or putting yourself behind this wall of protection, whether it's real or perceived, it doesn't matter. You know, it might feel contrary, but when you show up with just love, concern, care, and giving, everything opens up, doesn't it? Love, concern, care, and giving. This is something that I came across, or I was, one of my mentors talked to me about, and I've put that as anytime I write content, anytime I'm creating podcasts, anytime I'm doing anything, even before I go into a session with my clients, this is the phrase that I repeat to myself: love, concern, care, and giving, because it's not about me. It's all about information coming through me. When you can realize that it's just, you are just a conduit, you're just an instrument for things to come through you. The universe is constantly speaking through you. That fear just disappears, doesn't it? Just disappears. Brené Brown has built her entire work on vulnerability. And there's a reason it's so darn popular, isn't it? Vulnerability is vital. This is how we connect. Me putting out this content, me sharing my personal life. In last week's episode, my son just walked in. You might have even heard the door creak open, and I had to pause. And these things happen. And somebody might be like, oh my God, like, how could you do that? Couldn't you edit it out? But no, I don't have the time to edit it out. And it's too much work even to let my editor know that, oh, you need to go in there and edit this. I don't want to do that. So judging is going to happen. But you know what? It doesn't kill you. If someone judges you, it's their story. And often when we judge, unconsciously, we're all judging. And consciously or unconsciously. And judging, when you're judging others, you're judging yourself in the process. That's the bottom line. It will stop you from being vulnerable. Because everybody is doing whatever they're doing. Everybody is doing the best they can. And that is something when you can wrap your head around, just to be vulnerable. And it doesn't mean, so here's the piece. Here's the fine line. I am not saying vulnerable as in just bare your heart and talk about everything and how horrible things are, or whatever that is. It's not about that. It's about just sharing your life. See, when I'm going through something, when I am sitting with an active thing that I'm working on, whether it's a belief, whether it is a situation in my life, I wait on it. I don't often share that experience right then and there, not because I fear judgment, because it's not clear in my head. And when I get clarity, then it becomes a teaching moment, not only for me, but for the people I am here to serve. And then I bring that into the forefront. But I don't always share the process, because I need to be clear in my head, what is this about? This is not about getting bearing yourself up and having a pity party. I don't want that, right? But I'm here to empower. That's my mission. I'm here to empower people to find themselves, to discover themselves, discover who they truly are, and live their true essence. That's what I'm here for. And whatever I can share to help that experience for that person, that's what I'm going to bring in. So I'm always asking, how is this going to help somebody or not help when I'm sharing something? And so these are questions you can ask yourself. So the number one thing is to be vulnerable. I see this over and over again. Fearless leaders are vulnerable. I haven't yet read the book by President Obama, but I hear, at least the reviews I read, it's on my list of books to read. He's very vulnerable about his experiences, and it makes it more relatable. And it doesn't matter, right? Like whether he was the president or not. Like it doesn't. We're all human beings. At the end of the day, we're human beings. And here is a very funny fact. Human beings are self-centered. They don't care. Nobody cares. At the end of the day, if somebody judges you, they're going to move on. It will die. It's no longer going to be present. Nobody cares. At the end of the day, after some time, you just move on. People move on. So you have to ask yourself, am I going to protect myself based on what could happen and not say something or not do something just because, whatever that is, whether it's in your personal relationships or at work or whatever, or your team? And you can ask, what is appropriate for me to share? How is this going to uplift somebody, or whether it will uplift or whether it won't? All right, so that's the first characteristic. The second characteristic that I've seen with leaders over and over again is they have daily practices. Personal growth, personal development practices, whatever that is. Whether it is mindfulness practices, meditation, or getting up and journaling first thing in the morning, or exercise, taking care of their bodies, whatever that is, they have daily practices. In that book, Compound Effect, the author, Darren Hardy, talks about having specific practices the first thing in the morning, like exercise, or he sits and journals, or he writes something every day. So I can't remember the specifics, but that popped into my head. And it's vital to have daily practices because repetition is how we learn. Every day, I have to remind myself of certain things because the default is to go back to old patterns, is it not? So I'm here constantly. It's like reminders. The daily practices, I will not start my day without meditation. It is non-negotiable because I know how the day goes if I don't do that. And as is eating well, this is just for me, everybody has their own daily practices and you have to come to your own. I need movement, some kind of movement. I need to make sure that my family is fed. So I cook, not elaborate meals, but I make sure there's fresh food every single day. There are certain things that are non-negotiable in my life, but these are things that are specific that I know works for me. You have to find that for yourself. The thing with daily practices, what's underlying that is discipline, is habit. I used to not like the word discipline because I grew up with a lot of discipline in my life. That's just how I used to live. But there was something in me that rebelled against the rigidity of what I call discipline. That here is the bottom line. Nothing has meaning other than the meaning you give it. Correct? So the meaning I gave to discipline was it's rigid and it is constricting. But I don't do that anymore. Discipline keeps me well, keeps my family well. See how I shifted that very quickly just with their thoughts and words? And that's what this is. Daily practices come with discipline because we take care of the things we love. And I take care of myself because I love myself. And I invite you to do the same. Do the things that make you feel good, whatever that is. And this is something to really, really be mindful of and be watchful of. Like, what are some of the daily practices that are going to help you get to that, wherever you're going, whatever your goal is. All right, the third characteristic of characteristic of fearless leaders. This is something I've seen. So they're so willing to look at themselves. They're willing to be in a place of a student. They're willing to look at themselves. They're willing to constantly grow. One of the things I have noticed, and these are my words in terms of what I'm putting together, what I've seen, they're watchful of how they think, how they feel. They keep themselves in higher vibration, like keep themselves up in a uplifted state, because there's awareness that thoughts affect your vibration. They may not call themselves spiritual, leaders, but this is something I've noticed. Like they just know this intuitively. They're willing to look at something, whether it's serving them or not, and willing to walk away from things that are no longer of service. And, like I've said in my other podcasts episodes in the past, like I used to really have this big attachment to struggle, to make things hard. And this was often like this attachment was unconscious. I didn't know I was attached to struggle and making things hard, but I was. And oftentimes, if you look at your own life, right, we protect ourselves based on our past experiences. Something happens in the past and you get hurt, you get disappointed, something doesn't go the way you want it to go, you don't feel supported, you feel alone, whatever that is, right? The past experiences, it just forces you, or that not forces, it dictates your current, how you show up in your current circumstances. But we all know that the past is a dead horse, isn't it? See, and it's not you. This is how the brain is programmed to be. It's focused on just staying with the familiar. Think about it. The brain is so focused to keep us safe, and the way it keeps us safe is to focus on what's familiar. I know this, so I'm going to stay here because I know this more than I don't know the unknown, even though the unknown might be better for me. I don't know that, so I'm not going to do it. And I used to work with a client a long time ago, and in my therapy practice, and she grew up in an authoritarian household. This was many, many years ago when I was doing therapy. And she grew up in an authoritarian household. There was barely any love shown. And again, our parents do the best they can. This is just how they were, and this is what they knew. And this has got no blame on any parents, but I'm just inviting you to look at it and how you can relate it to your own life. And her parents' marriage was also not the best. You can just imagine, right? And the interpretation she made of her life. Again, everything is an interpretation. Everything is an interpretation, which, by the way, we all do, especially as children, when we can't make sense of a situation or whatever is happening around us, our brain organizes it and it puts it into this, what's the word? It flows it through interpretation, like it makes an interpretation of the situation. And then it becomes a model of our world. And that model fits us. So her interpretation was that she had to do everything on her own. Vulnerability wasn't safe, like she had to be very protective because if she showed vulnerability, she could get hurt. And the biggest interpretation was that I'm not loved. And in her marriage, she used to often feel like she wasn't loved. That's how it showed up as well. And guess what happens when you look at something from that lens of whatever that lens is, whatever that belief is, whatever that interpretation is? Right? We create it, don't we? And that's exactly what was happening for her. Like she just created this life. This has got nothing to do with leaders. I'm just giving this as an example, right? So when her outlook was, I am not loved, again, it's so unconscious. I'm all alone. I have to do things by myself. It was created in her marriage. And she constantly felt like she wasn't being supported. And not to say that her marriage, like her partner, and even the person she chose fell into that box. Again, we choose what we're familiar with. That's what she was familiar with, and that's what happened. And why am I sharing this here? So why I'm sharing this here is because I'm inviting you to look at where in your life are you struggling and what is your attachment? What is causing you to be attached to struggle? And how is this connected with how you're thinking about your life based on your past experiences? Here's why this is important. It's because the universe is constantly reflecting us. The universe is not testing you, it's reflecting you. How you're feeling on the inside is being demonstrated on the outside. And there are no facts, only interpretation. If you look up German philosopher, I'm going to butcher this name, Friedrich Nietzsche. It's Nietzsche. Nietzsche. Is that how you say it? There are no facts, only interpretation. I want you to sit with that phrase and apply it, especially if you're a leader, especially if you're a visionary. Apply it to your own life. Where in your life are you making interpretations of something? And is that interpretation serving you or not serving you? Everything is an interpretation. I have an interpretation. My podcast is really amazing. It's so great. And yes, there's evidence based on what people DM me or share with me or tell me that, oh, wow, like I really enjoyed listening. And then I have proof in air quotes on the downloads that I see through the place where I host my podcast, so I can see it. But it's a freaking interpretation. I don't know. That's what I've interpreted it. And that's what I'm assuming and concluding my podcast is amazing. So I'm going to show up as though my podcast is amazing. And do you see how by having that outlook, it's actually going to bring in experiences that makes my podcast amazing? If I didn't believe it, if I felt like, the content I put is just okay. I used to do that, by the way, not for the podcast, but things I used to do in the past in the business that didn't work. I'd be like, who's going to do this? Why would they buy from me? Why would they want to do this? Guess what happened? That business bombed. And that's okay with me. It's all a learning experience, and that's fine. But it's all interpretations. And when my husband, this is a funny example, again, talking about interpretations, when I do not like going to the grocery store, I hate it. So either I order the groceries or my husband goes and buys it. But when he goes, I will often give him a list and he will buy things that are maybe not on the list or he'll forget something. And my interpretation would be like, he can't, why can't he? He's a very heady, he's very logical, very left brain kind of guy, analytical kind of guy. And sometimes he forgets things. I'd be like, he forgot and this and that. And I used to get all tizzy about it. Like when I would not find something that I asked him to buy or he forgot some, or he would get something that didn't match my criteria. And there was one day he said, you look, it was really funny. Now we can laugh about it. It used to bring a lot of arguments between us. And he one day he said to me, he said, you look for the fact that I'm going to mess up, and I do mess up. I was like, ooh, okay. That was like hit by a 2x4. It's true. I was looking for that, and my interpretation was he is going to mess up, and he would mess up. So, the universe is always reflecting us, and there are no facts, only interpretations. There are very few facts in life, by the way. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. I totally digressed. But I feel, it was on topic. It was not on topic, but was still on topic. All right, so the first one that we talked about was fearless leaders are willing to be vulnerable. They have daily practices. And fearless leaders are very self-aware. They watch their thoughts. They watch for interpretations in their life. And they're very self-aware of how they're showing up and what are their inner shadows. And that's what I meant when I said they watch their thoughts and they know that whatever they're experiencing, there's always a shadow side to everything, isn't it? All right, so number 4. Fearless leaders are not victims of their circumstances. What I have seen over and over again is that they create their own realities. They create their own realities. Alia Crum, who's an assistant professor at Stanford, she did research and she proved that our minds aren't passive observers. They simply perceive reality. So, okay, let me read this to you. I wrote down the quote that her research summarized into this. Our minds aren't passive observers, simply perceiving reality as it is. Our minds actually change reality. And if you're not sure about what I'm talking about, I'm going to invite you to look up the double slit experiment on YouTube. The double slit experiment. It's all about how, as an observer, we actually change the outcome of whatever that is happening. We change the outcome of whatever we're observing. And so our minds actually change the reality. Our minds aren't passive observers, like Alia Crum, she said. And this is really important because that's how leaders make changes in the world. Because they're not just saying okay to what is happening or what they see in front of them. They're willing to make shifts based on how they are showing up and how they can change the world based on what they are. As a visionary, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Number 5. I have seen this over and over again with fearless leaders, is they are willing to not take anything at face value. Meaning, it very much relates to not creating their own realities. They're willing to look at anything and everything and say, is this a limiting belief? Is this a belief I want to subscribe to? They're willing to look at everything as a belief. And here's the piece, right? When I say not take anything at face value, they're willing to see what's beyond what they're currently seeing. And like I said before, these characteristics, these things that I'm sharing with you are more mind-based, they're more brain-based. And what I've seen is that fearless leaders are willing to look at everything as a belief. See, none of us are born with beliefs. We acquire them. We're born, think people literally dump stuff into our head, and then that becomes a belief. And we live our entire world, entire life based on other people's beliefs. My invitation to you is to not argue for your beliefs. Be willing to look at them. Be willing to question everything that you are thinking and feeling. Be willing to question. And again, like I've said in other episodes, filter it through how does this make me feel? If it doesn't make me feel good, it's a belief that I do not want to carry, and so I can change that belief. All right, so we're on to number 6. I love this one. Fearless leaders are willing to go where no person has gone before. They're willing to take risks, and they come at it from a place of service. I am a huge fan of sci-fi, especially Star Trek. And my favorite Star Trek used to be Voyager. Captain Catherine Janeway. She was like literally my idol. Like I used to like take in. We all have role models, don't we? And so she was one of my role models. I loved how compassionate she was, how she worked with what was given, what the circumstances she was facing, and yet was so commanding. There was this blend of compassion and leadership, which I just loved. And so I'm inviting you to look, whether it's fictional or non-fictional or real people, find a role model leader, and share with me, by the way. I would love to know. Just DM me on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys. On a role model that you pick, and base your. So here's okay. Let me see if I can reframe this. Look at the characteristics of that role model that you have, and write them down, and see, okay, what traits do I currently have? What traits do I not have? And that's a very amazing way to create a leadership archetype that you may or may not already possess. It's really fun exercise to do, and it's very exciting when you do it that way. And I always go back to that archetype that I have, especially when I'm not sure what to do. And the reason I bought Captain Catherine Janeway, is because there were many times they had no. If you have not watched it, please, if you like sci-fi, watch it. It's really fun. There were a lot of times she didn't have a clear path, and she based her path on her principles. And by having something like that, like your own manifesto, it gives you a template, a map when you don't have one. Especially when you're facing circumstances or situations in your life where you're like, I have no idea what to do here. So to summarize, the 6 characteristics that I have written down, or I shared with you, was fearless leaders are willing to be vulnerable. They have daily practices. They are very aware of the fact that they're willing to look at themselves. They're willing to be a student. They're willing to look within themselves to see where they can continue to improve. Number 4, they're not victim of their circumstances. They create their own realities. Number 5, they're willing to look at anything and everything as a belief so they can change things as and when they want to. And number 6, they're willing to go, take risks, and come at it from a place of service. And they are willing to go where no person has gone before. All right, my friends, I had so much fun with this podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed it too. As always, please share with me your thoughts and breakthroughs. DM me on Instagram. You'll find me there, or on LinkedIn. And please leave a review, share this with your friends and family, and if you find value, they would find value too. All right, I will connect with you guys next week. Take care, have fun, be well. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening. I have a request for you. If you found value, chances are that your friends and family will too. So if you can leave a positive review on iTunes, it will help reach so many more people. And if you have any topics or questions you would like me to feature, please send them to support@padmaali.com. And lastly, please share your takeaways and breakthroughs with me on Instagram @Padma Ali. Thank you so much for tuning in.